IC Network Studios proudly presents D13 Live 2.0. Your protection from deception. As the world grows darker, we must stand together and stand out in truth. The truth in Jesus Christ. Welcome to D13 Live 2.0.
Alrighty, good evening everybody, and welcome to the show. Tonight I have with me Gary Wayne, and we are going to be discussing the ancient monsters and the dinosaurs. This is kind of going off of the video I did weeks ago about the reality of ancient monsters, so glad to have you with us tonight, Gary. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well and very happy to be back with you guys tonight, and looking forward to a very interesting conversation, I think.
Absolutely, because I know you were talking to me earlier. You got a chance to watch the video, and just kind of want to get your take on that.
Well, awesome video, and if anybody hasn't seen, I highly recommend that they take a view of it after the show, hopefully not during the show. And what I really liked was, basically three things and of course two of the things is you shone some light in some great detail on the stones that came out of the Ika River down by Nazca, and all the different sort of saurian beings that they have on those stones, and anything else that has obviously got a great age to it, even though I know there's reports out there that with people trying to discredit it. And then the other one was the Acambaro clay figurines that are just astonishing. Again, that seems from a couple different ages, but again showing dinosaurs and things. And then the third thing I really liked about what you were doing on that is now you're taking it back to a Genesis scenario and saying where and how does this fit in, and how do we sort of sift through that and understand it biblically and be comfortable with it. And I really liked that whole approach.
Yeah, because the one thing, I hear a lot from, especially my brother and friends, like, man, I can't wait to get to heaven and ride a T-Rex. And I'm just like, I don't think there's going to be T-Rexes in heaven, because they don't seem to fit in with God's created order.
No matter how friendly they might be, if that were to be the case, I can't see myself riding a T-Rex.
I'll pass on that.
Big time pass on that.
Yeah, because it's just the more I looked into it and the more research I did, I'm just like, these creatures only seem to have a few selective goals, and number one, it was death, killing, and destruction. Because I thought I could only imagine what it would have been like to be alive during those times, to see these things walking around and the fear that they must have generated.
Yeah, I mean, it would be just absolutely horrific. Eating machines, as what most predators are, but of such a gigantic size and nature that I just can't imagine even trying to coexist with them. I mean, you'd be in a state of fear continually.
We even see Hollywood kind of pushing a lot of the T-Rex stuff. I mean, like the movie Land of the Lost, he befriends the T-Rex and rides it, and I'm just seeing that in quite a few different films. I'm like, it's interesting why they're trying to push that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a sort of a cult sort of understanding there. I mean, get away from what science tells us about dinosaurs and perhaps when they roamed or when they didn't roam, but they're definitely, and there's enough evidence to say that there's dinosaurs that were around. But aside from that, and you get into what they actually believe, we're talking about an age overseen by fallen angels that I think were a seraphim type angel, a reptilian type angel, or a serpent type angel. And some of these gods are just shown as just total reptilian figures, but you actually get some bigger descriptions of these seraphim angels, like feathered serpent of South America and Central America, like Quetzalcoatl and Voltan, some of those other gods, essentially all the same god or type of god. And I look at a seraphim angel with a serpent face or a saurian face, and with feathers that make the wings as they are in the physical world. And I see kind of like a preferred kind of species or animal that would have been created kind of after their own arrogance and their own kind of image, right?
Yes. I mean, I almost looked at it like it was their pets.
Yeah. And those types of animals being created in their image as in direct contrast of humankind gets formed in Genesis in God's image. Mm-hmm. I think that is there for a particular reason. And just as when fallen angels, they mate with the Nephilim, they take on the same look in the early creations with that viper looks.
Yep.
I think that whole ideology and notion of God and angels, perhaps, with angels sinning against creation and creating beings at their own likeness, is something that we should overlook, because I think it's really telling us that, and it gives us more to how we were created and what our image is.
Because even on some of the Ica stones, we see depictions of, if we look at the size of some of these dinosaurs, the supposed men riding the dinosaurs couldn't possibly be a normal-sized man. So I started to wonder, this looks like a giant riding atop this dinosaur, using it to kill and eat people.
Yeah.
I mean, as funny as that sounds, because I know there's some crazy comic books out there, that show Nazis riding dinosaurs with laser beams on their head, but it's like it's almost a mockery of something that did actually happen, because we have this recorded in history on the Ica stones. Yeah.
And so are they depicting what they saw, or memories that came down from legends, or are they depicting something that goes further back? We can't tell, but it does make sense to put that in Genesis. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, absolutely.
And again, I mean, when we look at dinosaurs being created, are they created to be ridden by giants, or are they kind of pets of the gods, as you suggest? Which I guess some of them were demigods, so we may be just I may be splitting hairs on that comment. But yeah, I think they were preferred sort of life form for the seraphim angels, and I think they created a world that was just completely corrupted against the laws of creation, and I think these beings were created illegally.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing that stood out to me the most while I was making that documentary was, in Genesis it reads that the world was filled with violence, and I'm like just picturing, what these dinosaurs' behavior would have been like, and I'm like, yeah, I can see the violence. I can see total out of control bloodlust violence. Yeah.
And beyond violence as well. I mean, that's part of the violence. But, when I look at Genesis 6:11 or 6:12, where it talks about how corrupt the earth was, and the whole, everything on the earth, was corrupt and filled with violence. So there's a direct connection there. And corrupted, goes back to Hebrew, to shakath, and it has an interesting meaning that sort of, I think, brings out the understanding, I think, better than corruption does. And so what it translates out of Hebrew is literally ruined and cast off and perverted, and I think, and spoiled. And I really think when we understand what the fallen angels were doing in the antediluvian epoch, they were perverting the whole world. They were not just corrupting it, they were corrupting it and spoiling it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, to the point where, I think God looks down and he says, the whole world is corrupt, and because of that, it's violent, and there's nothing I can do but to start all over, because it's completely spoiled and ruined.
Mm-hmm. Like here we have a great question from Marble Water in the chat. It says, were all of the angels a corrupted pre-flood seraphim or a mixture of different types of angels?
Well, I would say that there's a mix of angels. I would say the seraphim are sort of the ruling class, or the highest order. And in Isaiah 6, we understand them as being around the throne of God and having 6 wings. So they're right up there with cherubim. And Satan seems to be both seraphim because he's a dragon and a serpent, and also called a cherub if we apply Ezekiel to Satan. So this is a very, very high order, but I don't think it's all of the angels. And the reason why I say that is if we go to Revelation, we understand that there was 100 million angels that were created, or at least that we're told about. Mm-hmm. And then later on in Revelations, we're told that there's a war in heaven, and a third of them are sent down to the earth. And so I kind of understand that whole idea that there's like 33 million angels, and not all of them are probably going to be seraphim, because there's going to be several different orders and classes of angels.
The Bible is clear on that. There's thrones, dominions, princes, powers. There's a whole bunch of different kinds.
Yeah. And so what we don't know is how many are in each sort of designation or role, but they all had and were created for specific purposes. But a third of them did rebel, and I think so. We have to say that there was more than just the Watcher order of seraphim and other seraphim angels.
Because I don't know what you did in your research. I still have yet to read your book, but to my knowledge, the main protagonists in Genesis 6, the 200. I believe those ones were chained and bound in darkness, and they are still chained and bound in darkness.
Yeah, the impassioned ones, absolutely. Anybody who violated the laws of creation, I think it's quite clear that they were bound in chains and put in the abyss, and will be, let loose in the end time again. But that would then suggest that ones that weren't impassioned or didn't violate laws of creation are still free and able to deceive humans until through to the end time.
Yeah, because we already see this technology emerging now. This is just what they've been showing us. Who knows what they're doing in secret. We got the pig-human hybrid that was successfully raised. We have the CRISPR technology that keeps advancing more and more. We now have the first human being that's been created with 2 fathers and 1 mother. We're seeing this progression of this Nephilim type technology coming to fruition now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question gets to be, for me, is only 2 things. One is how were the dinosaurs created, and were they created similar to how some of the beings of mythology were created? And secondly, do we see that sort of consequence again somehow as we go into the end time, as the impassioned or the most corrupt angels are released from the abyss? And do they start to duplicate this in ways that we can't even really imagine unless we imagine what prehistory looks like? So
yeah, that's why I really wanted to emphasize the point in my video that, when Jesus said the end times will be a time unlike any other time in history, that tells me that this is going to be worse than what was going on in the days of Noah, but those days will be cut short. So we got some rough waters ahead of us.
Yes, it should escalate at an ever-increasing pace as technology and the end time comes closer. So I think things will move very, very quickly when this starts to come about. And I think our technology is just catching up now to being able to add on to those violations of creation in ways that were only written about or imagined about in science fiction, or perhaps from a cult where the science fiction comes from, perhaps literally from history that they've been writing about, right? Because it seems to parallel pretty exactly. So almost like they're reading from a script that already happened.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, because we know, if you look at the timetable, several thousand years this was going on in the days of Noah, and just compared to now, though, just to look at the progression we've had here in the last 100 years. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking thousands of years they had back then,
Yeah.
so it's easy to see how the world could easily have become completely corrupt in the flesh, and this violence. I mean, all these mythological creatures that we read about, people assume that they're just fantasy, they're just made up, but they had to originate from something.
Yeah. And within the mythologies, they actually give a beginning or a creation story to most of these beings that are recorded in prehistory. Having said that, I'm not convinced we get dinosaurs being recorded in prehistory legends and mythologies that I could really put my hands on. But we do get some really bizarre looking beings that we can attribute, at least according to their belief system, out of the religion and mythology it comes out of, as to where they came from. So again, interesting parallel. I think these the dinosaur story is very much related to those fantastic beings in mythology. Just not quite sure they're exactly the same story. I think it's more parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And seemingly the Nephilim would be closer to the creation, I think, just thinking out loud and walking through this, to the creation of some of these beings, whether or not it was, Pegasus or a satyr or a cyclops or a centaur or a chimera or, the gnomes and the little people or the mermaids, and on and on and on and on. They seem to be taken back to a copulation between the gods, right?
Yeah, because that almost goes with the theory I have of, if you take one species and you successfully are able to blend it with another, and then that species or that entity goes out and has intercourse with another species or entity, now if that genetic barrier is broken, it just starts to cause this pollution.
Yeah. And again, going with that, even though I have not run across written accounts, going with the figurines and the stones that you're talking about in the video, you actually depict some scenes where there is a sexual act going on between a being and some sort of animal. And then if we project that, if you can create through an average human of 5 to 6 feet tall, to a giant that is at least recorded in the Bible, we could probably look at 15 feet tall, but they could have been bigger, 20 to 40 feet, and we don't know what an L is in Enoch. We don't know whether that one's accurate or not. We don't know how big that sort of DNA insertion into humankind actually made the first generation of Nephilim, but they certainly made them giants.
Yes.
So then if you put that into some sort of animal, you can imagine a dinosaur of great size being created.
Yes. Yeah, because even some of the other mythological creatures we look at are, horrendously giant in size and very fearsome, very bloodthirsty, and there's always usually some occultic stuff that goes around it, or magical stuff.
Yeah. So it's really quite interesting that that's a possibility, or they were using the technology, which is, again, as we approach the end time and we look at where our technology is, what that means is we caught up to the days of Noah. Our technology at that time is greater than what we have right now, and our technology is developing at such a rapid pace. I think we're doubling our knowledge every 1 to 2 years now. I know it was 5 years and then 3 years, and I'm not sure quite how fast, but our technology and knowledge is going to do things in the next 5 to 10 years that we can't imagine, because it's just going to be so rapid, I think. So that means that if the antediluvian technology and sciences were that advanced, they could have done easily DNA manipulation to create some of these original beings, and then maybe copulated, or both, or one of each. It's hard to know. But I think DNA manipulation is what we're trying to do today, is got to play a role in what happened in prehistory as well, I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Because I mean, we already kind of see the progression, as I stated in the video I did. You know, we see the I don't even know what it's called, the gender bending weird stuff that's going on. You know, that we need to accept these people. That, you know, it's all okay to be whatever you want. A man and a woman can be, flip their sexes upside down, whatever. And it's like, I see that as a progression towards the future exception into society of a hybrid entity, a hybrid person.
Yeah. And we see more and more sort of visualizations of the sort of feminized goat god, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder whether or not that has a relationship there, where there was that going on. I mean, it was, you know, homosexuality. Just kind of wonder about that, because, you know, these goat gods, which are, again, feminized in some of the depictions, whether you call Pan or Azazel or Baphomet, several other names that they'll have. I mean, these are seemingly a specific order of God in not only the mythological world, but in the Bible. And, you know, there's a number of laws that the Israelites were given, and one of them was in 17:7 not to do sacrifices to goat idols, and or demons, as some translations might have. But, you know, if you take that back into Hebrew, I mean, it was a he-goat, it was a hairy goat, or a satyr and demon. So I think there's a specific relationship to these laws that God had made for the Israelites that included, you know, like I guess 18 about having sex with beasts, as I think it comes up in Deuteronomy 27 as well.
Yep.
And also in Leviticus, these laws are kind of surrounded sacrifice to goat idols with, you know, do not drink blood, which was another sort of Nephilim
absolutely
ideology. And so, and don't cut your body and tattoo your body, because I think that was a significant sort of aspect of the ritual and religion of the Nephilim, and not to practice divination and sorcery. And sorcery, at least in the Greek version, comes down as drug, things like that, prescription, right? Pharmacacia. Even though that this is in Hebrew, but if I were to transliterate that into Greece. So I think those laws that are sort of grouped in Leviticus for the Israelites are to ensure that they don't corrupt themselves, as was done in the antediluvian world, and to prevent, or at least slow down, the aspect of those sins returning. Because I mean, Israel's created to be a pure nation, a priest to deliver the Messiah. So it makes sense that you wouldn't want that antediluvian corruption as part of that Israelite line.
Yep. Yeah, because it was always, you know, my firm understanding that, you know, some of the reasons why this corruption was going on in the days of Noah was to try to prevent the coming of the Messiah through the bloodlines, which some people scoff at. But, you know, it makes perfect sense to me. The prophecy was given right off the bat in Genesis. As soon as Adam and Eve were booted out of the garden, that prophecy was right there. You know, the enmity between the two seeds.
Yeah.
And then, and then we see right away we got Genesis 6. We got this corruption beginning and eventually just flooding over the whole earth until the actual flood came to, you know, destroy it all.
Yeah, and specifically the serpent seed again, which goes back to seraphim, right? So it has to be some sort of offspring or creation of these seraphim angels. And I, like you, believe that part of the Genesis 6 story, as opposed to serpent seed through Cain theory.
Yes.
And so, and there's no need to have Cain written in that way, and it's hard to arrive at that biblically unless you go to outside sources, which again you shouldn't rely on, right? So you can use it as context or possibility, but I can't 100% say that there's anything in Genesis that would tell me that Cain was the son of the angels. But I will say this though is anytime I look at scripture that people put forward to me, say, well, here's what it says and why it is that way, is they take it from a literal understanding into an allegorical understanding, which is completely separate from the narrative that quote that they're using is used in. And so what I mean by that is just, let's say in the main one is where they use, eating from the tree of good and evil. I'm sorry to get on this tangent, but I thought I better explain myself. Where they take that eating of that tree as eating of the fruit of the tree as a possible alternative meaning of seduction, right? Mm-hmm. Is the rest
Holy
of the narrative
seduced, they call it.
Yeah. Trouble is the rest of the narrative there says, it was clearly a fruit good for eating.
Yes.
Nothing about sex, and also and for gaining knowledge of good and evil. Again, nothing to do with sex. So the only way you can do that is arrive at a sexual connotation is plug that into a small piece of the narrative, apply it with the alternative meaning that's disconnected to the rest of the narrative. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing else. And check the words going back, whether or not it's the knowledge of good and evil or good for food. None of that you can take back and find sexual connotation or alternative meaning to.
Yeah, because otherwise we have a problem, which, is where God says, now man has become like one of us to know good and evil. I'm like, mm-hmm. So now if we have the sexual connotation here, that makes absolutely no sense, what God's saying there.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're, again, that you're saying that the whole idea of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is about learning about sex. But again, there's nothing to base that on. And how would that come to some sort of level of greatness or godhood? And in heaven, they don't need to have partners and they don't need to have sex because they're immortal. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
But I digress. Sorry.
That's fine.
So I think that whole ideology of that serpent ideology comes down through Genesis 6, and the laws that get coming out of for Israel in the post-Diluvian epoch are designed to protect and keep the purity of the Israelite stock for the Messiah, which was trying to be subjugated humans or corrupted or destroyed from the face of the earth, so that we can't be raised above humans in the future world. So that's always going on here and continues right through to the end time. So again, if you have that understanding, then all of this is going to be part of the end time again.
Yes, because when we look at the Genesis 6 serpent seed, which I have to say that every time I say serpent seed now because of this very issue, but yeah, the Genesis 6 serpent seed, as I was researching, the Mayan and the Aztec cultures, we see a super, super heavy influence of the serpents and snakes and dragons all throughout their culture.
Yeah. Every culture.
Yes.
Around the world. India, same thing. China, same thing. Dragons and serpents are their gods. They're creation gods, just as you have the Olympian gods portrayed as serpents.
That's right.
This is a constant in all of polytheist religions and mythologies around the world. And wherever you have pyramids, you got dragons and serpents and those types of gods. So you have the demigods, you have the kings and the gods, and this serpent and dragon imagery is just burgeons in all of these different societies. And unless you have an understanding of who the seraphim is, what they look like, there's a disconnect there, right? Mm-hmm. But when you understand that, Isaiah 6 talks about these seraphim angels, and if you go back to understanding what they want to look like, other than Revelation 12 with Satan, where he's called a serpent snake, you go back to Numbers 21, and this is the story about the venomous snakes in the desert. And Moses is instructed by God to put this image of a serpent on a staff that's going to protect and cure the Israelites from the bites and the poisons of these venomous snakes. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that all of the serpent or snake words that are used in Numbers 1, except for one, is Nakash, same as the serpent that is in Cash.
Mm-hmm.
But the image that goes on the staff goes back not as Nakash to Hebrew, but to seraphim.
Yeah.
So you get the understanding then that a seraphim looks like a snake, right? And is a serpent. And then you have the allegory out of Revelation. And there are many Gnostic Gospels, not that you want to rely on those by any stretch of the imagination, will give descriptions of the watchers and the seraphim angels as serpent-like, viper-like beings. And we have all this other gods around the world. And we do have, like I say, those verses where we can rely on in Scripture to say, hey, now that adds up. That makes sense. That's what they look like. And then that makes why we have all of this snake imagery that dominates, not only animals, but the royal kingdoms and worship, and just is unaccountable otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I had to do some deep digging, on Google Images and various other websites trying to find some of the Egyptian depictions. I found many of these outright creepy depictions of these serpents with an erect phallus, like they were standing before a throne, like they were offering something. And I'm like, you don't see this on Discovery Channel.
No. And they don't like to show the if I can remember how to pronounce Ogdode gods on the reliefs and inscriptions. I've put out a few posts on them over the last year or so. These were definitely serpent gods.
Oh yes.
There's no doubt about it. And then you have that serpent connection with Enki in Sumeria.
That's right.
I mean, he was known as the serpent god, and Enki stands for earth, which is Ki, and En as his Lord. This is the serpent god that's Lord of the earth, and he's the rival to Enlil, as they like to discuss him in Sumerian mythology, which they say is the god of the Bible, but that's typical occult sort of dualism, where they degrade God in a manner to lower him to the same power of Satan, so that they can sell their dualistic good versus evil religion, that they actually have a chance to win.
Yes, because another thing too that I've always been fascinated in researching, is the Anunnaki, because we see them talked about so heavily, especially on the Ancient Aliens show. They're always talking about Anunnaki this, Anunnaki that, trying to basically pin them as, they're the real creators, they're the ones that put us here, they're the ones that bred mankind to be a workforce. And with the research I've been doing, when I look at the Anunnaki, I believe these were literal physical beings that were here, that were extremely, unbelievably intelligent, that were worshipped by people as gods. And it was just, it's just stunning to think that, these were worshipped deities that were destroyed.
Well, if you get into the detail of the Anunnaki, you've got the Anunnaki from heaven, so gods like Enlil, and then you have the Anunnaki, some versions will call them Igigi, of the earth, and these are the demigods. So they tend to be the Nephilim demigods in Sumerian mythology, and they were the lords, and they were all crowned by the gods of heaven at Nippur. So this is, again, just another Nephilim story that's told from a Sumerian polytheist perspective, just as Titans are the same type of being as Nephilim told from the Greek religion and mythology. And what's interesting, I was just going to say, just what's interesting concerning Enki, to kind of connect this a little bit more, he is depicted as a horned serpent in his glyph.
Ah.
Right? And he was also, the god of wisdom in Sumerian. So again, bringing knowledge, forbidden knowledge to humankind and helping civilize them.
Lisa in the chat has a question for you. She wants to know if you know who Joseph Campbell was. She said he did a lot of research into mystical heroism from other cultures.
Yeah, no, not familiar with him, but sounds very interesting. Right up my alley, so to speak.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
heard
no.
of him either.
Yeah. And then what's also interesting about Enki as being that serpent god is that he was known in Hebrew mythology, as in a seraphic form, and they believe that Enki is Samael, they would call him in the Talmud and in Jewish legends, certainly as recorded by Louis Ginsburg. And what's interesting about that is they believe Samael was the name of Satan in his seraphic form. And again, just sort of going on with that and connecting that back into Sumerian and ancient mythology out of Mesopotamia is Enki was known in some Persian traditions also as Samael and god of Sama, so Sama El. And of course, Sama was in northern Mesopotamia, and that Enki was the lord of Sama. So all things tend to point back to that. And then also in that Persian tradition where Zoroastrianism comes out of, Enki and Samael is called Ormazd, meaning serpent of the night. And Ormazd was another name for the high god of Zoroastrian, which was Zarathustra, and also known as Ahura Mazda, which again, Mazda goes back to that bloodline of kings. So all of this thing just keeps rotating around and around and around with this saurian, reptilian, seraphim image, and it doesn't matter where you go. I just did one little thing in one of the ancient civilizations.
Yes. I was just looking up something here in Ezekiel.
And also in that pantheon, sorry to interrupt, I meant to say it a little bit sooner, is Enki and Enlil are like also offspring of Anu, which Anunnaki comes from.
Oh, okay.
So again, that's how you can make these other gods. Anu is like the parent god, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might also know that as the life force of the universe. What were you going to say about Ezekiel?
Oh, I was just looking up something quick in Ezekiel. There's always the one verse that popped out to me was Ezekiel 28:16. This is God speaking about Lucifer here, or Satan. He says, "By the multitude of thy merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire." I was doing some research about that today. This merchandise that mentions there, and I was going through an interesting conclusion, what is this merchandise that is being discussed in this verse? It's almost like, is this speaking of, that Satan makes merchandise of secret knowledge to men?
Yeah. Yeah, so many connections in there, as well as the violence and the corruption, which is again almost a connection back to Genesis as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, we're talking about a prehistoric being, so those things should come back and forth before and after the flood.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Throw a little more support about what your video talks about in terms of copulation. Forming some beings, whether or not it's the dinosaurs. I'll use mythology because I'm not a dinosaur expert. But if you look at some of the fabulous beings out of Greek, which is really good, I can throw out a couple other ones too from other areas. But centaurs were half man and half horse, right?
Yes.
And in Greek mythology, that was a union between Ixion and a cloud, whereas Zeus created this cloud in the image of Hera, or a goddess, that Ixion had sex with. So I don't know what the cloud has to do with it, whether or not there's that's a DNA manipulation, but clearly sex is involved too. And out of all of that comes centaurs.
Mm-hmm.
right? And Cyclops, that single-eyed giant, which was considered a brother or a sibling of the Titans, and they were created in the same way as Titans through Uranus and Gaia were the parents, right?
Yep.
With Gaia being Mother Earth, and in the allegory, as they take that back, those were human females. And you have also Gaia and Uranus producing these 100-handed ones. I'm going to try and get this out. Hecta something to that effect. I struggle with some of these ancient names.
Yeah.
And you also have a Pegasus, that's a winged horse.
Yeah.
Or winged stallion.
That's a pretty famous one.
The horse of the horse god of Poseidon, and that was created, which is really bizarre. And there's 2 or 3 different versions, but there's some similarities. You have like a mingling of Medusa's blood. Of course, Medusa is that god or being that has serpents for hair, right? And if you look upon her, you turn to stone, right? That I think was Perseus was out to kill. And also, this blood somehow is helped by Poseidon to create the Pegasus. And what a lot of people seem to think on that is there's another side story that is being referred to with that suggests that Kronos had rebelled, and he cut off the testicles of Uranus and threw them into the ocean, which somehow with the blood or with Medusa, or the blood of Medusa, Poseidon mixed and helped to create the Pegasus. So it has a really bizarre creation story.
That is strange.
Yeah. And then you have the little people that are created, right? And in Greek mythology, you have the Nereids that are the daughter of Nereus, a male god, and a female named Doris. And a Doris is an aunt to Atlas. So again, Atlas is one of the Titans and the offspring of Poseidon and climbing, right? And out of these Nereids, Pericles will call some of these little people gnomes. And that comes out of nomi, meaning earth dwellers or earth elementals.
Because I know that's very heavy in my culture. Even my grandmother and my great-grandma, they always talked about little people. They said that they were thieves and they would steal stuff out of your house. But they spoke of it just like, hey, it's a real thing. They didn't speak of it as if it was a joke.
Yeah. Well, and again, little people are in basically all cultures, whether or not it's a Native American, or it's in European, or it's in Southeast Asia. There's always 3 different classifications of them, and gnome is one of those classifications. They're the ugly ones, just like the goblins come out of there and several other ones. There's many different varieties under each subgroup, and you have the mischievous ones like the leprechauns, and you have also the good-looking ones called the little people. Good-looking ones like as in Tinkerbell, right? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting again, though, as we dig deeper into this gnome or little people classification and creation of Nereus and Doris, is it's connected to mermaids, right? And so the mermaids are the offspring of, in the Roman mythology, which is essentially the same as Greek mythology of Phorcys, and that's the Greek Nereus, right? And so, of course, mermaids, and of course there were mermen as well, they're also the offspring of Nereus and Doris, right? And so, and Nereids in Greek mythology are small ones. So you have different classifications even within these Nereids that are coming out of this god and seemingly human female. And what's interesting about that is that mermaids are also called sirens or sirens, S-I-R-E-N-S. And they are very interesting because, again, this part's not, well, none of this is biblical, but moving to Enoch 19, the first book of Enoch, it says in there that the females that copulated to create the Nephilim, all of those women, they died, right? But because they created a crime against creation, these became the sirens to lead men to worship demons as gods. And as we talked about later, goat gods, right? As in Pan. And of course, Peter Pan is significantly related to fairies and little people, right? All of this just keeps going around and around and around.
Yes, it does. A little bit off topic, but not really. Was an interesting post someone had put in the Facebook group. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but it was titled "The Fallen Angel Craters." That really, really stuck out to me because, you know, I don't know where you were at concerning the Hebrew cosmology of Earth or flat Earth or any of that. But when I look at a lot of these craters that we see around the Earth, you know, they're whatever hit the Earth had to come straight down, because we don't see any sideways skid marks or things like that. And I've always wondered, because most scientists date these ancient craters, you know, around the age of dinosaurs or whatever, and I've always been curious as to know what your take is on a lot of these enormous craters that we see around the world.
Yeah, I haven't really spent any time about the craters. I'm not. I'm not really ready to comment on that at all. Haven't studied, and so you're right. It makes you wonder if something's going to hit, why doesn't it skid? Why does it just go down? Right. That makes perfect sense. So, what's the common sort of theory on what's causing the craters if it's not a meteorite or an asteroid?
Yeah, I guess, you know, what the person was trying to get at or hint at or suggest was that, you know, are these the craters of the angels that fell or were cast out of heaven? And I thought, well, I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and they would appear the same way falling out of the sky, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, lights falling and exploding on the ground. Yeah, certainly possible.
Oh, we have another question in the chat from Marble Water. How do all these Mediterranean myths tie into Crete, where supposedly the Philistines originated from? Goliath, of course, being a Philistine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, two things is that the Philistines seem to be a people that mix in with some other sort of original nation that's on Crete. And they all seem to have like an Aryan or a Nephilim sort of hybrid mixing while they're still there. And then when they move over to the land of the Covenant in around 14 to 1500 BC, just before the Israelites arrive, this is the most powerful people of that time, and they come over with weapons of iron, and they control the iron technology and industry, and that's how they're able to destroy the Hittites and how they were able to back off the Egyptian Empire and to seize the land and move in with the Abim, which is another race of giants, which makes some sense if they have some sort of connection back to another branch of giant. And so they actually control the iron industry, even to the point with the Israelites. I mean, they wouldn't sell them iron even to make plowshares and stuff because they're afraid they're going to make it into weapons. And not till afterwards did places like the Hittites start to be able to smelt iron themselves, and other people start to make their own weapons. And that's why they were so powerful. But they are a mysterious group that sort of come out of before they go to Crete. They're in Egypt, and I think the Egyptian word for them was PRST, as they called them. Not sure how they pronounced that, but that's sort of the root word for the Philistines as they come down to be known in the area of Philistia. But also in the Bible, I mean, they're not known as Philistines until after they get to the covenant land. And we also know that the Philistines, they descend out of the table of nations, so they have to be some sort of hybrid if they had some Nephilim blood in them when they go to the land of the covenant. That's why I said I think they must have mixed somewhere in Crete. But they bring this technology with them, and it's an unknown technology. And I know history will say iron wasn't known at that point in time, but clearly, and I'll point it out in as I talk about the Philistines in my book, I'll give a little bit of chronology and history about the Philistines and iron in there. So not sure whether I answered the question.
About the iron in that, because I was just doing a lot of research here last week. I watched a couple different videos about Tubal-Cain and the mention in the scripture of him being a metal worker, and why the Freemasons are absolutely obsessed with Tubal-Cain.
Yep.
And what was interesting was one of the parts on there, it showed the, I think they called it the million-year-old bell or whatever it was. There was a bell, a brass bell, that was found in a coal deposit hundreds of feet under the ground, that supposedly was taken from a layer of coal that is supposed to be like 300 million years old or something absolutely ridiculous. But the problem is they found this bell, they found other very detailed pieces of jewelry and artifacts that look like something that could be modern made.
Right.
But the interesting thing about the bell that was found is it's a pagan bell. It has a feminine deity on the handle. When they did the metallurgy on it to see what it was comprised of, it was comprised of a mixture of brass and copper and some other various chemicals that to this day can't be replicated because it was cast so perfectly. Wow.
Well, and Tubal-Cain is remembered in Freemasonry history as the a master artificer, like of a level that they've been trying to emulate for ever since. I mean, it's just amazing how much reverence that they actually have for Tubal-Cain. So when we look at what the Bible says about him actually smelting iron, now we have at least a biblical suggestion that iron goes back a lot further than what I had mentioned about the Philistines bringing it over. So I think probably this idea of making iron metals was kind of lost for a while. But there are artifacts that science has found that they find absolutely unaccountable, where they have iron that dates back to the time of Egypt, about 3000 BC.
Yeah. Yeah, because I always find it funny, how a lot of these archaeologists and that try to say that, oh, well, the pyramids were built with copper tools. Yeah, the heck they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not possible.
And one of the biggest weapons that the Philistines used the iron for was on the chariots, right? And nobody else had, and they just absolutely slaughtered the armies once they had control with those iron-wheeled chariots.
I can only imagine how terrible that must have been.
Yeah. So, just trying to remember remember what that artifact was from about 3100 BC, I think. They called it, as I recall, like a metal from heaven. So, and I understand that was when they say that, that's knowledge that would have come down from heaven to these iron weapons. And certainly Tubal-Cain is credited for smelting those weapons. I can't remember what those artifacts were that I was reading about. I apologize for that. But anyways, it's got a lot deeper history than what we're commonly taught in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
actually, no, I know what it was. It was an iron blade and also an iron axe. That's around 2800 BC.
There was another interesting artifact that is very limited to being discussed. You can look it up online, but it was Tutankhamun's dagger that was in his tomb. The dagger was somehow forged and made from a very rare meteorite metal. which the scientists couldn't figure out how on earth they were able to get a fire hot enough to forge that material.
Yeah. 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 Again, we're led to believe that they didn't have this knowledge or technology. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I firmly believe that the technology that they had, and especially as they approached the time of the flood, was a technology that was just mind-bogglingly high.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get it in before I forget about it. When we look at all of this corruption and copulation of creating beings like Nephilim or these other fantastic beings, or possibly even to create dinosaurs, and we understand that not only was there a rebellion of the fallen angels, but there's seemingly they've done something that isn't going to be forgiven. There's not going to be grace provided for them.
Yeah, they're done, pretty much set in stone, judgment done for them.
Yeah, and typically, if you accept Jesus and God through faith, I mean that every sin is forgiven, right?
Yep.
So I think this has a tie-in then to what Matthew was talking about, was sins against the Holy Spirit, that those sins are forgiven. Everything else is forgiven except if you sin against the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether or not that violation against creation, because the Holy Spirit is essentially life, right? Life
Yep.
of the Spirit. And that's Matthew 12:32 is what I'm referring to. I wonder whether or not that's the crime, by violating the laws of creation in such abominable ways, that why they're not going to be forgiven. I'm certainly not going to hang my hat on that as doctrine, but it's just kind of crosses my mind is if they did turn from their ways, why wouldn't they be forgiven?
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Yeah, I find it interesting, and it kind of does make some sense. Have you ever seen the movie called Splice?
No, I haven't.
That's a very interesting movie. If you should watch it if you get a chance. But basically, that's what happens in that movie. These two scientists, they decide that they're going to prove that they can mix a human with animal genetics to see what if they can create this super being, and they end up succeeding. But they have to keep their experiment secret from the corporation they're working from, so they end up kind of doing their own logging and everything. And this creature is birthed in an artificial womb. They raise it. It goes from this really ugly, gross-looking serpentine type thing into a very beautiful, feminine-looking creature. But what's creepy in the movie is how this creature's violent behavior just gets more and more apparent. I mean, it has no cares for human beings or animals. All it wants to do is kill. And towards the end of the movie, this thing turns itself from female into male and essentially rapes the female scientists, and the movie ends with showing her pregnant. And I was just, literally my jaw was on the desk the first time I saw this movie, because I'm just like, wow, what are they showing here?
Yeah. They call that splice. That was, I guess, through DNA manipulation.
Yep. They were using the computers and splicing in different things together.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was human mixed with like 5 or 6 different species of animals.
Wow. Again, when we have that law in Leviticus 19 not to mate different kinds of animals, right? Mm-hmm. And I would take that then to mix DNA, right? Because it's still, a violation against creation, whether or not it's copulation or through DNA manipulation. And, and that's such a strong law in Leviticus 19, because not only are you not to mate different kinds of animals, but you're not even permitted to plant 2 types of seeds in a field, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
You're not even permitted to weave 2 different kinds of material together for clothing.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like we see that example everywhere. Don't do that. and humans are such good listeners, right? We follow instructions so very well.
So yeah, I think that's again, that's why I think that DNA manipulation and transhumanism is all part of this greater Nephilim concept, as I like to talk about it, that happened in the antediluvian epoch. That again is going to happen in the end time, and we're starting to see that.
Because I think that's what a lot of people don't grasp fully is, things happen slow over time, so you think more and more gets accepted. I mean, now homosexuality is accepted. It's accepted in most churches. It's accepted by most Christians. Divorce is fully accepted.
Yep.
We see a lot of these things that used to be very stern rules that you would follow, to now where it's like, oh, it's okay to live together without being married. There's nothing really wrong with that. We see this progression. And I'm seeing this in the scientific community now. They're pushing the bar more and more and more with this genetic engineering. And I thought now they're heavily into the realm where this is going to start stirring God's wrath and anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I can't get that passage of Jasher out of my mind that clearly states, they taught the mixing of one species with another in order to therewith provoke the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, we have that other warning in Scripture too, that says, "Woe to those that seek the day of the Lord."
Yeah. And again, I think, and as I make clear as I do broadcasts, is that the other side, the spurious side, the polytheists and the Freemasons and all of the ones working with Satan, they want this rendezvous with destiny.
Mm-hmm.
It just won't happen until God permits it at the ordained time. But they want to bring this about. They want to bring about this showdown. And,
well, we actually see that throughout history. That's what I'll tell people, especially if we take a look at the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler. That right there, they were trying to get that same stuff. You got the sudden burst of weaponry technology.
Yep.
You have slaughter of people on a mass scale. You have, the military superpower, the trying to overtake of the world, and it's like, Hitler was a antichrist, very clearly.
You have a Reich Church that is pan-Aryan and usurps certain aspects of the Bible, including Jesus as a blonde, blue-haired prophet, but not necessarily a Messiah, and certainly not in deity status at the Reich Church. So you have that universal religion that is going to have two horns like a lamb and speak like a dragon. I think to underline your point, I think the whole Nazi scenario is so analogous to what's going to be so similar to what the end time is going to be like.
Yes.
Except it's going to be fully played out.
Well, I mean, I was shocked to find out they don't even teach stuff about Nazi Germany in the schools anymore. They don't teach about the Holocaust. It's just kind of dying out. Most people don't even know who Adolf Hitler even is anymore, which is pretty scary. Yeah,
and the Nazis were brought to power through a mixture of the secret societies, that came like a Germanenorden and the Thule Society, and a mixture of Theosophy, which is polytheism and an extension of Gnosticism, although they converted it to be Ariosophy, putting the Aryan sort of flavor on there. That Thule was either Atlantis or a sister civilization of Atlantis, and that the Aryans were the giants that ruled at that point in time, and that they are their descendants. So if you want to, like I say, every aspect that you look at with Nazi Germany is an analogy for what people ought to be looking at for what the end time is going to look like, but just advanced in technology and playing out to its full length. Yep. Where I think there's two actual genocides in the last 7 years, one in the first 3.5 and then one in the second 3.5.
Yep. Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize the heavy occult things that went on behind a lot of the mass cremations. The SS were taking massive urns. We're talking 100-pound urns of ashes, going out into the woods and performing occultic rituals with these ashes. And that's something in history that's not taught, that's not really known mainstream, but the SS was very heavily involved in the occult.
Yeah, absolutely they were. The whole regime, I mean, it was a religious theocracy that was ruling, a socialist religious theocracy. And that's what we're going to have in the end time.
Yes.
And they were seeking occultic ruins and artifacts and secrets all around the world. I mean, when people look at Indiana Jones and they have Nazis in it, they're just telling actually what the Nazis did.
That's right.
And they actually believed as well that, and again, understand they come through the creation of secret societies and the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons. It's a rogue form of Freemasonry, and it got away from them. But they believe that they spoke to the avatars or the Great White Brotherhood. They believe that they were getting knowledge from that realm to help them control the world. And the Third Reich was just going to be a 1,000-year reign. It was going to be a duplicate of, or a counterfeit of, Jesus' 1,000-year millennial, just as the new age of Atlantis is that counterfeit 1,000-year reign of utopia that they're going to promise the people at the end time.
Yep, because the main goal was to create the Uberman, the Aryan super soldier, the Superman.
The new man.
And that ties back to Nietzsche that was discussing that God is dead and all that other nonsense.
Yep. And the new man is just creating a new Nephilim. It's the Nephilim concept.
That's exactly
right?
what it is.
And they were doing that through two ways. One was trying to backward engineer genetics by breeding to get that pure Aryan race, because they believed in the Rosicrucian concept of Vril. And Vril was an ideology readily accepted by the Nazis where they believed that this was the bloodlines that came from the giants, and if they worked with that blood, they could figure out how to engineer giants going forward with that bloodline.
Yeah.
And so, bloodlines and blood purity was a constitutional part of Nazism. That's why you had to prove that you were of the superior race if you're going to be allowed to live.
Yep, exactly.
And that's going to be the same way in the end time. And when we see all of these blood banks, banks of knowledge on blood, and we have DNA banks, and we have all of this information about humankind, I think they're going to use those banks of knowledge to decide who has genetics that goes back either through blood or the gene of Isis back to the giants, and decide from that who they're going to let live in their new age of Atlantis.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that one bit. I mean, we see this trend going with transhumanism, and these transhumanists, even openly say, don't you dare get in the way of me becoming a god. I believe there was a scientist, that's what he actually said.
Absolutely. That they're trying to create immortality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they're actually doing is they're creating, there might be a couple different classes, but let's say we stick with the biological one, and you can actually clone a human sort of form, and you can transfer your conscious into those clone forms through perpetuity. That's kind of what they're going to promise to humans to rebel is that we'll give you godhood or immortality in this physical world, but I think they're trying to create these vessels for the demons.
That's exactly what my theory was, because I always said if you take genetics of a human and genetics of a dog and genetics of a horse and you mix them together, well, it's not a human, it's not a dog, it's not a horse, so what other spirit could inhabit that vessel?
Yeah. And we know demons possess humans, right?
Yes.
And wouldn't they love one that they could control
fully,
more easily ongoing, right? Just jump into it. Have an oikotarian of the physical world, a dwelling place for the spirit, which is the same word that habitation derives of in Jude 1:6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just watched a creepy movie here the other night called The Discovery. It was a movie that was made by Netflix. Very bizarre. But I right away picked up what the underlying tone in it is. What happens is this doctor has discovered proof of life after death by basically wiring his brain up to this weird supercomputer, which was interesting because the wires come out through this Oculus into his head, which, I'm sure you're familiar with the Oculus. And he is able to video record the afterlife via this computer, showing that we have a secondary life after this life. And what happens in the movie is, after this discovery is made, millions of people start committing suicide to move on to the next level. And
great.
Yeah, the point that they arrived at in the movie was this other neurologist comes in, and they start putting these dead bodies in the machine, and they're able to start recording these dead bodies' brain activity of their spiritual activity, showing that they get a second chance in this other life to correct the mistakes they made in the first. I'm like, oh boy. Isn't that a handy little lie?
Yeah, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I get a kick out of this whole idea of reincarnation and going back and trying to sort of evolve through the spirit world through time to become a god. That's, to me, is just a ridiculous idea that goes back to the Nephilim and the demon spirits, that they didn't reincarnate. Their bodies just didn't, their spirits didn't go to sleep, and they weren't permitted to go to sleep, and they weren't permitted to go to heaven, right? And so this whole idea that people see ghosts, or that there's this reincarnation, and they always take reincarnation back to the gods, which were the demigods, which were Nephilim, and that their spirits, and actually used to worship these spirits after they died, because they were so upset about not having a body. It's called the hero worshiping, that comes out of Greece and Taoism and out of Egypt. That this was not reincarnation. This was punishment. This was these beings who no longer have a body, and their spirits roam, right?
Yep.
This has got nothing to do with evolving into gods.
No, they actually, the Bible says they roam in dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that tells me it's pretty miserable.
It's pretty miserable. And and they only have time to fill and to try and hurt humankind as much as they can until they meet their judgment.
Yep. Yeah, that is actually the basis of the movie that we're going to be creating this summer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to be outlining exactly how these spirits operate and function, because I believe it's just really important, because Hollywood's busy cranking out their garbage, but they're not going to show you the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
But we're going to actually be filming on a location directly by Nephilim Mounds over in Montana.
By what? By Nephilim mounds?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that.
It was a discovery. It was made back in 1890, around there. They dug up some mounds over by the Missoula area. And inside this mound, they found several 9-foot skeletons buried with very small female skeletons. But the creepiest part was they found the skeleton of a wolf in there that was the size of a horse.
Wow.
And they said it was not your average wolf. So that again tells me something that's Nephilim. That was a pet, obviously.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it's amazing how many of these discoveries, they never go reported in mainstream media or into schools. They're just filed away and ignored because they don't fit the set narrative that they want to brainwash people with.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And again, I mean, what I find interesting about so much of the giants that have discoveries that were made in terms of skeletons and that in North America is that they had red hair.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you can't see this, Gary, but in my hands here, this is the skull of an average wolf. This is the normal size. And the one that was found in Montana was 10 times this size. So about the size of my entire body was the size of this hybrid wolf skull. So I can only imagine, how extremely spooky that would be to see a wolf, the size of a horse.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many more of them there might have been.
Well, I always wonder, how many skeletons has the Smithsonian destroyed or hidden away of various things.
Yeah. Well, there's just so many newspaper stories that were recorded, and they're on various data banks, and I have some connections on my Facebook pages to them. And Giantology is another one to go to on that. And another fellow, Chad Riley, has a whole bunch that he posts and has information on just an incredible amount of newspaper writings that have stories, they have diagrams. Some of the later ones even have some pictures about all of these giants that are discovered all across North America. And they inevitably get sent back to the Smithsonian, and then they're never heard of again.
Yep, they just disappear, they vanish.
Yep, yep.
And that's another aspect that I was looking at too with the ancient monsters, is the fact that I think a lot of these creatures were probably specifically created and made by the fallen angels because of just the fact of sheer entertainment. We look at what the Romans did in the Colosseums. They would have men fighting elephants and tigers and lions and everything else, and I just look at it the same way with some of these dragons, these dinosaurs, or terrible lizard is the original term. They were probably doing the same thing. They would probably have games and throw people out there to these monsters and do it for fun. Yeah.
And certainly humans would not be considered a superior being of any sort. No. In fact, we're considered like cattle, right? So to have us sacrificed in their games is, all par for the course, so to speak.
I got a question. Drew Bloom wants to know if you are familiar with Jim Wilhelmsen.
I have heard of the name, but people might be surprised that, when I wrote my book, and even to this day, I haven't really researched other people in the same field. I've just sort of done my own research and then connect that back to the Bible and see how that comes out. So I'm sure that's a little disappointing for some of the listeners, but yeah, I'm amazingly naive of other researchers out there and what they have said.
Yeah, I've heard the name drop a few times. I haven't got around to looking at any of his stuff either.
Yeah,
I'm usually too busy. I don't have time to watch a lot of other stuff lately. I mean, I'm working on a documentary right now that I'm almost finished with, connecting the spirits of the Nephilim to serial killers. Because a lot of people don't look at that aspect. I've watched countless hours now of interviews of psychologists just trying to wrap their head around why these serial killers did the extreme things they did. And I'm like, well, it's simple. Look at the spirit that's inhabiting them. It's probably a very powerful Gaborum spirit that's in them. That would explain the cannibalism, the blood drinking, the homosexuality, and the other plethora of issues.
And the voices they hear.
Yes, the voices for sure. I mean, the best one ever was, the Son of Sam killer. I watched his interviews. He's a saved Christian now. And, he openly said, I was talking to a demon. He said, I was not talking to a dog. He said, the media, he said, they ran with this dog thing. He said, my demon's name was Sam. He said, Sam was the demon that gave me the instructions to kill and told me what to do. And I thought, how clever for the media to cover up the fact he was talking to a demon and say, oh, no, he was talking to the dog. So I think that was purposefully done.
Yeah, I think so much of sort of mental medicine, as they might call it, and the various forms is designed to keep people's eye off of what is the true cause of so much of the insanity, that Christians would know as possession. I'm not saying necessarily 100%, but they just mix it up so badly that it just dismisses the whole concept of some of these great evils that derive out of possession.
Yes.
And again, that's the whole idea behind the development of the seven sciences, right? And what Enoch the evil and his descendants and Cain and the fallen angels, they wanted to utilize this knowledge to lead people away from God and not to give credit to God for anything, and particularly for creating the universe and all things, and that they wanted to honor their own pantheon of gods, the fallen angels. And so that was clearly in place in the times of Noah, in the times of Enoch, son of Cain, in Genesis 6, and the flood. And we see the same thing that is happening today. And that's no coincidence, because the Royal Society was created by the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists. They were created by Rosicrucians and scientists, right? Alchemists. And Francis Bacon has his picture of one of three in the Royal Society that was created as the inspirational founder, who wrote The New Atlantis, of course, where where science would be working in harmony with a polytheist religion in the sort of New Age. And so, and in this, you have this development of the sciences, which becomes the inspiration for the founding of the Royal Society. And what's important about that is what their goal was simply this, was to lead people away from God, to not give God credit for everything, and to build things and do things to honor the great architect of the universe, which is the god of the Freemasons, also known as Lucifer, and how I would say is Hell-El, coming out of Isaiah as opposed to Lucifer. And that all science and education still pays homage to the Royal Society today. Mm-hmm. So all of this is designed to, linking this back to demon possession and to the sciences of medicine, everything is designed to lead you away from God.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to reveal God.
We see more and more and more of this as time goes on with this occult is becoming so much more it's intriguing people, you know. Like, I know when the movie Ouija came out, Ouija board sales went up, you know, like 80% or something ridiculous like that. And I just see this infatuation with the occult and the New Age, you know, that like the warning signs are going way down. People are like, oh, you know, it's not that bad. It's not that dangerous. When in fact it really is. It's extremely dangerous to start messing around with those things.
Yeah, when people are hooked into these cults and these religions, are actually brainwashed. And there's a Facebook friend of mine, Barbara Biggs, who came out of the New Age religion and got herself deprogrammed. And the things that she says, and if you ever want to get somebody on to talk explicitly about what they teach in New Age and how it relates to exactly what we're talking about, and to the end time and to the polytheist gods and everything that's going on, get Barbara on, because she has inside information and is just a wealth of knowledge on it.
Excellent. So I had a question here. Someone wants to know if you are aware of the Ascended Masters in Samael.
Well, I referred to Samael earlier in the show as being the same as Enki and the same as Satan. Now, the Ascended Masters, obviously that has a relationship, but when we're talking about Samael, that is out of the Jewish tradition, and out of Sama, out of Mesopotamia, and Enki out of the Sumerian tradition. So generally the Ascended Masters, as most people understand it, comes down through Eastern mysticism and Buddhism. But you would also understand that in the West, coming out of the Illuminati, because they take part of the same name as the Great White Brotherhood, or the Celestial Masters. And these are the people that the adepts of polytheism and the adepts of secret societies like Freemason, Rosicrucians are communicating with. So these are demons. They also call them avatars, which would be demons, or angels possessing human beings. So they're talking to angels and they're talking to demons, and in some aspects are even called aliens, that they're getting all of this information from. But they are in direct communication. So that's how the Ascended Masters sort of connects in, and threw that other part in about Samael because the question included Samael.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I love how the names keep changing as we progress forward. You know, Ascended Masters and aliens and avatars.
Yeah.
It's all make it sound a little bit more innocent.
Yeah, well,
It's
and
like,
they call...
I'm not talking to demons. I'm talking to an ascended master.
Yes. I would call them the celestial mafia, but that's just my terminology.
That's a good term.
So, and they've been around forever. And again, they're leading people astray. They can take on any form. They act as, angels of light, just as their leader Satan does. And they're there to deceive people. And the best way to do that is seem like you are a good spirit. But they're seducing you away, and over time, they'll brainwash you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see a lot of that going on. I know Drew Bloom and I deal with that a lot. A lot of people say, they've seen Jesus, they've spoken to an angel, and that Jesus comes down and talks to them mano a mano, and it's like they're not discerning, they're not testing the spirits.
Nope.
That Jesus does not come down here and physically talk to us. They're most likely dealing with a fallen angel or a demonic entity.
Yep. And we're clearly told to test the spirits.
Yes.
Right? So, and you have to do that. But I'm sure it's spectacular, and I'm sure you get filled with fear and with fuzzy wuzziness, and you just want to believe, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you have to test the spirits because they're there to deceive us.
Well, it's funny too because most people right away when you say the word demon, the first thing that comes to mind is probably something that's red colored with horns coming out of its head and sharp teeth, and that's not necessarily what they have to look like.
No, definitely not.
Because I know, most of the, I do a lot of different research with, photography, and that's some of the older photos where some entities have clearly been captured, and most of them just look like shadows.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to, angels, unless they've lost their ability to take a form, the fallen ones in the physical world, I mean, they can take any form that they want, right? Mm-hmm. Seemingly any form that they choose. But the demons, to take a form other than a ghostly sort of figure, they need a body.
Yep.
So the demons aren't going to have the same sort of form as what the fallen angels are going to have that aren't in the abyss.
Because, I don't know if you've ever seen, some of the videos that are out there that you can clearly see the eyes of these people changing into serpentine-like eyes.
Yes.
I've looked into a lot of that. I do believe there's something to it, and I do believe that what we're seeing is a possession. Because we do know the eyes are the windows to the soul. So I don't see any reason why that can be sloughed off as, it can't be real. No, you are seeing that person is clearly possessed.
Yes. And they seem to be people who hold power.
Right? Absolutely, exactly.
Which, again, they're not going to, unless they are desperate for a body, I mean, they're going to take a hold of someone who can actually, live a good life and have power and can have influence. So it just makes sense because that's where they came from.
Because the most convincing one that I ever saw was a magician that was doing levitation, and you could watch his eyes during his levitation act of them flipping back and forth between his normal pupils and these serpentine slits. And I'm just like, you could watch it going through his eyes, and he kept making his eyes real big and then small, real big, like it was pulsing, and that would make his levitation go up and down. So you could see that demon was working through him, giving him that power to do that. And I've done a lot of research on the old magicians, and it's very clear all their posters showed devils and demons in it because that's where they were getting their talent from.
Yeah, and magic goes back to magi, which goes back to the seven sacred sciences and Merlins and wizards, right? It's the same sort of belief system that is magicians are used today to again make you comfortable with these black arts and to lead you away from God. And getting back to these black eyes, I find that idea that those are perhaps demon possessed to be an easier, and again I don't know which, and this is, for me, all speculation whether or not they're demon possessed or not, because I don't know. It's easier to accept than this changeling quality that people say that the reptilians have in human forms, right? So, which is kind of the same ideology. So whether or not people will show, let's say, Senator McCain with those black eyes, which I've seen some video on that. Mm-hmm. I find it easier to believe that they are possessed, although, and McCain has unfortunately, and I like him as a senator, but, McCain stands for son of Cain, and it's kind of like, and you see that, you go, whoa.
Yep, exactly.
But I find that a much more plausible idea than that they have this changeling quality.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Because I even saw a really creepy video of a young gal on a subway, and one minute she's sitting there digging through her purse just fine, and the next minute it literally looks like something just took over her body, and before you know it, she's just randomly attacking this dude next to her, punching him, trying to bite him and stuff, and he's like holding her down. And she's almost got like superhuman strength. It took like 3 or 4 cops to pin her down. I'm like, that's demonic possession right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and they'll either say she was just insane or she was on drugs or whatever, and they just dismiss everything. And it doesn't make any sense. But unless people are prepared to ask hard questions and pursue these things, they're able to hide these things in plain sight, and not nobody, but most don't question these things at all.
Well, and that's why I think the saddest thing with the modern church this day and age is the complete lack of understanding, the demonic realm and how it operates, because, we are told to be trained for that and be prepared to deal with it with most people, but most churches nowadays, they don't even want to talk about demons. They don't want to talk about possession. They just don't want to hear it because they just want to do their church game. And to me, it's like we need to be prepared at all times to deal with this type of stuff.
Yeah, and it is, I'm not going to say unforgivable, but it is so, let me say, disturbing and disappointing that the churches do not teach everything that the people need to put on their spiritual armor, and to teach about things that we do need to know about, that the Bible specifically talks about, and they refuse to talk about it. It doesn't matter whether it's Genesis 6, it doesn't matter whether or not it's the demon possession, and so many other different things that are in the Bible that they just will not educate their people about. It's disturbing to me.
It is. It's very disturbing, and it's harmful. And that, again, is another reason why we're making this movie. We're going to show people the real power of how you deal with a demonic possession and a haunting, is that it's only through the power of Jesus Christ that you can get rid of it, that you can be healed and be saved. Because every Hollywood movie will give you the same formula. They will entice you with the occult, show you scary things, show you how to get into the occult, but then they'll never tell you the exit or the opt-out.
Yes.
They will either throw in the Vatican, or they will throw in a Wiccan or some type of New Age person in there. The funniest horror movie I ever watched was called In Darkness, about these Nephilim spirits that were possessing this autistic boy in their home. Kevin Bacon had this Native American Wiccan woman, whatever, come in the house, and as she's unrolling her weapon bag of different objects, there was a crucifix in there, and he says, well, shouldn't we use that one? And the healer says, oh no, these demons are much older than that god. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. You wish.
Yeah, exactly. Again, you're right, they'll never show you the way out.
No,
they only want to show you the way in.
And I just find it funny, because to me, it's like people that are watching these types of movies, that stuff sinks in their head. They remember that, like, oh, man, some of these demons are older than God, and they'll just assume that it's real.
Yeah. And again, that will all be part of the deception in the end time.
Yeah.
And they're going to deceive Christians too, because they're going to deceive the elect if that were possible. And so these arguments are going to be very powerful, and the demonstrations are going to be very powerful. And at the same time, they'll destroy the credibility of the New Testament, and they'll change it to an allegory as opposed to a literal translation. They'll deny Jesus as the Redeemer and the Christ, because that's what the spirit of the Antichrist does. They'll demote him to mere prophet, because he'll slide in with this universal religion, and you can still have this sort of veneer of Christianity. And they are going to completely destroy Christianity and replace it with this cosmology that seems good underneath. But again, if you understand the mystery religions, you have what's taught underneath, which are lies, and only the people at the top have the real secrets. And the people at the top are always the rich, the wealthy, the powerful.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And I am working on a video with that as well, kind of going through the whole scripture, outlining the whole progression, especially with the Antichrist. There's so many different teachings about the Antichrist out there, and they all pretty much miss the biblical mark. They don't seem to grasp that this entity is not going to just be a regular old dude. I mean, it's going to be a supernaturally fueled being that's going to have powers.
Yes.
People are going to really believe that this is God.
Yep, this is going to be the true Messiah, or the true Christ, as he's going to replace Jesus for a short time. And we also understand in Revelation that he's, probably going to be possessed by one that comes up out of the abyss.
Yep, absolutely. Because I mean, just through the studies I do, just looking at these deities that were, being worshipped as gods in the days of Noah, I would truly believe they had supernatural powers as well.
Oh, absolutely, they would have. Yeah. Because two ways. One, either through their natural gifts as being Nephilim demigods, or through the help of the fallen angels, and to give them additional power. And again, we're told in the end time is that Satan's going to let all, and his counterparts are going to let loose all of their bag of tricks.
Yep.
To deceive us in the end time. We are going to see things that are unbelievable.
Well, that's directly in the scripture. It says, that Jesus' coming will be after the working of Satan with all powers and signs and lying wonders. So that relates to just what you said. The whole bag is going to open.
Yes, they're going to use everything they have, and we can't imagine what that's going to be, and we can't imagine the pressure that will be applied to people, and people sitting on the fence. And of course, the ones who aren't sitting on the fence, well, they're going to have to be slaughtered, because they're obviously taking a stand against all of this. And if you're prepared to stand up against that, then they only have one solution: kill you.
Exactly. Yeah, I firmly see that happening. People like us will not be very well liked during an era like that. We will be enemies of the state for sure.
We will definitely be enemies of the state, and nowhere to hide, because they'll have technology to find us. So.
Yep, exactly.
And what I do pity, though, is what happens to those who do take mark and swear their allegiance in rebellion and swear an oath to the Antichrist after they realize what they've done and that they've been deceived.
Yeah.
Because, again, that seems to be a violation against, going from an argument I threw out earlier, against creation as well, because they're not forgiven.
Well, and this is what I've always been curious about, because if we read in Revelation, it says that the ones that have taken the mark and worshiped the beast were not written in the book of life from the foundations of the earth. So that's pretty severe.
Yeah. It is. So you wonder whether or not this chip or whatever is implanted with this mark actually changes the DNA somehow. Or
I think it does. That's what I firmly believe. Because people are going to want it, and it has to do with worship as well. So it's something that is offered by the Antichrist as a, I look at it as it's going to be a counterfeit immortality DNA upgrade that, you know, I am your creator. This is the missing junk DNA that can be flipped on. You will never be sick. You will never be tired. You will never be, you know, it'll be all this wonderful stuff that I can totally see people saying, to heck with Jesus. This is here and now. I'm taking this.
Yeah, they'll be offered God, and this will be part of the package, and this is part of the price. And you have to fight for your freedom. And then you have that genetic tie-in again, because the people who do take the mark of the beast break out in these painful boils.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll scream for death, but death will not come. Yeah. So, again, it seems to be that somehow either backfires or explodes or just works against the body. And you know, for the people who take that, because these boils come out, and it just seems to be another tie-in as genetically, and again a tie-in back to violation against the laws of creation.
I mean, I can give an example to extreme pain. You know, just a few weeks back, I had to go to the ER because I had a gout attack that was in my knee, and my knee swelled up to about the size of a softball because I didn't go in and get it taken care of. And I have never felt pain on that high of a level to where any, you know, minute movement, I couldn't bend my knee. It was locked in place. I couldn't put my pants on. I couldn't put shoes on. And I thought, this high level of pain, you know, I can only imagine the pain, like you said, these people are going to be having that have taken the mark. It's going to be worse than that, but there's no pain. You know, like when I got to the hospital, they gave me a shot of morphine. These people won't get that. They won't get any relief.
It's not going, that pain's not going to be dissipated.
Yeah, there will be no, okay, oh, it's over. Thank goodness it's over. No, it'll be like that. It'll amplify even worse when they get thrown into the lake of fire. Well,
yeah, but even before that. So this pain will not stop without end, and it'll seem like forever. So then we're also told they're not going to die, but people are going to try and kill themselves because of the pain, but they can't die. So they're going to even make the pain even worse.
Well, because I even believe that after the source, I believe, is one the vilest port of the darkness. That is, I don't know where I saw that from, or if it was. The darkness will also be so terrible that there'll be gnawing of teeth, gnawing of tongues, or something to that effect.
Yeah. Which is
well, then of course you have the sun. The sun will be given power to burn people, so you have that on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just wonder how violent the people are and how crazed they are at that point in time. Like, I don't think you could encapsulate this in a movie somehow. It'll be so horrific. I don't think we can imagine that.
I know, I've watched so many Christian type end time movies, and I'm just like, these are so watered down, it's terrible.
Yeah.
I'm like, we can't even fathom what this is going to look like or be like for those that take the mark. I mean, it's going to be unbelievably horrific. It's not going to be very fun. If it is fun, it will be for a very short time.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, people will fall all over themselves to take it.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how big the deception will be.
I mean, I don't know if you've heard of this weird series on Netflix now called Black Mirror.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's a very interesting show. It's kind of like a modern-day Twilight Zone, showing the dangers of where technology's going. Boy, there's some stuff in there that's awfully close to understanding the upcoming mark and the punishments. It's almost like the devil's putting this stuff out there as like, here's some entertainment. By the way, there's a little bit of truth to this.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst episode I watched was where this woman, you see her on an operating table, she's put under, she wakes up in this white room with a control desk, doesn't realize where she is or what's going on. What they've done is they've acquired this technology that takes a clone of your consciousness and puts it in a computer that runs your house. So it's like your own copy of you that's your own servant.
Wow. And your own, of your spirit, it takes a copy.
Yeah, it takes a copy.
So a counterfeit spirit.
Yep. And the scariest
Wow.
part though was when she refused to obey because she thought she was her. And this guy's like, "No, see that over there? That's you sleeping in bed." He said, "You're a copy of the real one." And she's like, "Well, I refuse to work." He's like, "Okay, I'm going to give you 15 months to think about it." He pushes this button. For her, it was 15 months. For him, it was a couple seconds.
Yeah.
But in the end of the episode, they were showing how they were using this technology to punish criminals, and they set this one guy, it was 1,000 years for every minute.
Wow.
And that freaked me out.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine. I mean, oh, man.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they tell us what they're going to do, what things are going to be like in plain sight, and they know most people will not understand what they're talking about or have it sink in. It's unbelievable, and yet we see more and more and more and more of it, which again, and more commonplace and more often, which is why I think again we're closing in on that end time, because all of these things are happening more quickly and more strongly, as in birth pangs, right?
Yeah, because like I firmly believe, we have the internet now. I firmly believe they had a similar type of internet in the days of Noah. I believe they had a worldwide connection through the obelisks, because this one scientist, I forget his name, he said, "I'm going to stop you all right now and tell you something about an obelisk." He said, "It's not a penis." He said, "It has nothing to do with that." He said, "That's a more modern interpretation of what it is." He said, "The original obelisk had everything to do with emitting frequencies like an antenna."
Yeah, like, similar to what Tesla had built.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So now we don't have obelisks, we have radio towers.
Yeah. And the phallus is just misdirection and misinformation, right? To keep people satisfied with some sort of superficial answer that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I see that a lot now. I see people like, "Oh yeah, that's just a symbol of the phallus." I'm like, no, that's not originally what it was. I mean, they don't realize there was a worldwide grid system. The ley lines, that's all realistic stuff. That was all known and utilized by, the fallen angels and all. They knew of that stuff. They knew of the secrets of Earth. They knew of the secrets of heaven. That's why none of that can be replicated to this day.
Exactly, until the end time.
Yep.
And this history is known and kept by polytheist forces. Mm-hmm. And that's why it always, you see it, that's always out there, but it's like a mythology or it's like a fringe theory or whatever. But for them, it's their history. And again, they're just getting people ready to come out and say, we are going to have the new golden age as it was in old. And you're going to become gods, and everybody's going to accept it because they've all been prepared for it subliminally with all this stuff that's out there all the time.
Yeah, I mean, with all the research I've been doing over the last year and a half on the pineal gland, I see it everywhere now, hidden in movies, hidden in TV shows. But most people watching it, they don't know that. They don't realize that they're being subliminally programmed to accept this stuff little by little. That you can be a god, you can ascend, and you can, it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah. I mean, they're already preparing us physically. It's the spiritual aspect that they're going to have the biggest issue with. But, just the ability that they're seducing us with, well, you can, be able to grow new hearts and any organ and everything else so that, your body will continue to live, right?
Yep.
So they're seducing us with that, but the end game, as you and I mentioned earlier, is not to have us live as gods forever. They want their own kind to take over the earth, just as the Georgia Guidestones would take the population down to 500 million, and it's believed to be Rosicrucian stones and doctrine that were placed there, and for the demons to have bodies to be the demigods and the rulers of the earth again.
Well, it's the old typical Hollywood trick, you got your powerful villain that befriends a human, promises him riches and all that, and then when the enemy gets what he needs, it's just disposable. And this is what I see going on with mankind nowadays, especially, what was going on in the Third Reich. these demonic entities and the devil himself have been using mankind to get this technology up and going, get these things, out there and functioning so they can utilize them for their own cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people don't understand how much technology that the Nazis developed in such a short period of time, they haven't done the research. Because, when Hitler takes power in 1933, this is a bankrupt nation still, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have an army. They don't have any of these sciences or technologies developed. But by the end of 1939, or before 1935, they have things like these tanks, the Panzer tanks, which are still utilized in design today, where, they're the low profile, the thick armor, the powerful guns. And then all of a sudden they've got these other things coming on down the road that they had no business developing, like
rockets, jet engines.
Rockets and jet engines, and the stealth one-winged airplane, and this bell-shaped thing that people think was a weapon or interdimensional travel, and so many other things. In fact, this technology was so powerful that Operation Paperclip scoops up 1,200 to 1,500 scientists and people working with it to take back to the United States, that the whole sort of military from airplanes and jet engines and rockets and the space program is built on. And they did all of this within 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not possible. So where did they get the information from?
They invented the audio tape.
Yeah.
A lot of the technology that we even still utilize today came from Nazi Germany, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
The whole space program became because of Nazi scientists.
Yeah. Makes you wonder that if they had another 2 or 3 years, how history would have changed because of the technology that they were able to develop. And with those tanks, the only thing that stopped that from winning the war for them was they couldn't produce enough of them fast enough.
Yep. Well, they had already had fission devices being created. They were on the verge of already, having the A-bomb before America did.
And if we take them at their word, and if you understand that they were an occult organization in religion, and secret societies formed them, and they were all initiated, and that if you take them at their word, they talked to these ascended masters, these ascended masters. And that's where they said they got the technology and information from.
There was a very old book I had about Adolf Hitler that spoke of that. They said that Hitler was known to have fits of total fear in his bedroom because of an entity that would be in there with him that he was scared to death of.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it came to the end of the war, Winston Churchill ruled that none of this occult stuff was going to be part of the trials, because they didn't want to let the Nazis off on pleading insanity, because these things were just so wild. And that's why only in the last 10 to 20 years have we learned about how occult the Nazis actually were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even really know a lot about it until History Channel started playing that stuff. And then all of a sudden they just quit. Like, they did it for a little while and then they quit with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they don't want to get too far out in front of them. They don't. But it's out there enough so that people, if they had a curiosity, they would dig into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a lot of interesting history on Adolf Hitler and his connections to, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was basically kind of like a fortune teller guy who was a Jew that Hitler kept in very close contact with, because Hitler was utilizing him to speak to these entities and that. And this is all what formulated him getting involved with the Thule Society and all these other different things.
No, I had not uncovered that, but again, none of that surprises with me, because everything they did was wrapped around their belief system, from the swastika that comes out of Eastern mysticism and back through ancient history, to the SS that's based on the Teutonic Order, which again goes back in their Volkish ideology back to Thule, as well as ancient order of Night Kings and things like that. And they also overlaid the Grail ideology all throughout their belief system in the SS. I mean, it is just immersed with black magic and alchemy and black sciences. And again, one wonders, coming out of all of that, with Hitler looking at himself as a Messiah-like figure, and his oratory capabilities, was that him speaking, or was that him being possessed and able to hypnotize through that type of oratory? Because how he was able to hypnotize people through his speech is unimaginable to me.
Yeah, exactly.
But I imagine we're going to find out when Antichrist comes along, because he'll be a greater speaker than Hitler ever was.
Oh, I'm sure he'll have beautiful words that'll come out of his mouth that everybody will say, "Are you nuts? This guy is awesome. Look at him." Yeah. I can already hear it being said. People worshipped Adolf Hitler. You watch some of the old videos. The crowds just were roars of applause and clapping. They loved him. Mm-hmm. And I believe it'll be like that on a worldwide scale with the Antichrist.
Yep, absolutely it will. And the people who stand up against Antichrist as he's rising to become crowned at the 3.5-year point are going to be arrested and murdered, because the world will love this false Messiah, and they'll hate the naysaying Christians.
Yeah, because we already see that starting to rear its ugly head now with, if a Christian stands up for his moral values, let's say, I don't want to make a cake for a gay wedding, they get slapped with a $100,000 fine. We're already seeing that progression of the utter hatred for Christians, because we're evil, we're hateful people, we're against progression, we're against, letting men be in a woman's bathroom. It's already starting. Yep. And it will get worse from here on out.
And we were told that the world would hate us. We just haven't seen to what degree. Mm-hmm. But we will find out. And, I think all of the constitutions in the world that have been written in the last couple hundred years, and starting with the base model of America, it was written in a way that they could persecute Christians when the time came. Mm-hmm. The freedom of religion was more written in there, in my understanding, to protect the Gnostic religion of the secret societies.
Oh, absolutely.
And then to turn our belief system into a hate religion as they persecute us.
Well, we see that now, like the case in Colorado, where they had to remove the park bench that had Jesus on it, but yet the Satanic Church is allowed to have billboards all over town.
Yeah.
Because they get freedom of speech, freedom of religion, but the Christians, we're slowly being shut down.
Yep. And that's going to continue, and again, become stronger and stronger as we go.
Yep, it will. And I believe that's why Jesus said, when these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption is at hand. There's a reason he said that, because these things are going to be big, huge, powerful events.
Yes. Not
just these little, like a lot of people ask me, like, look what's happening at Syria. I'm like, Syria's a drop in the bucket to what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nothing. It's it's interesting, and it's tragic, but it is not. It's not even in the same sort of universe as to what's coming, and this is just that creating of instability, setting up the end game to bring in the end time, and it's taking a lot longer than these groups would want. because they've been ready to go for a long time. But the restrainer obviously is still here, and
Yep.
it will not happen until the restrainer is removed. But I just have to think that we're just getting closer and closer and closer. And unfortunately, we're going to find out how bad it can get, because I think we're going to see it. And no matter when the rapture happens, and I'm just thinking also in terms of what happens in Revelation as we understand it, that if rapture doesn't happen, as a pre-trib rap, as most people are relying on, is you're going to have another whammy that's hitting Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's a whole nother episode I could go into there, is discussing the restrainer. Not many people talk too much about that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big chunk of the understanding end times, because my research shows that it's Michael the Archangel is the restrainer. That's the conclusion that I've personally come to. And I believe that, it says when the great prince stands up and moves out of the way, watch out.
Yes.
Because that's what's going to be bad.
Yeah, and I agree with you that it's one of two. It's either Holy Spirit, as most people and I believed for many, 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 many years, was the Holy Spirit, because that's what Jesus sent when he left, would be removed. But the closer you look at Michael and you understand Revelation 12 and some other passages, it could very well be Michael.
Because he seems to be the one angel mentioned throughout Scripture that has direct dealings with Satan.
Yes, and fights against the Prince of Persia, which is part of that empires that come down through history, right? And that was at the time of Daniel. So I think that's a very strong case as to who the restrainer is, and the restrainer is also able to handle Satan.
Yep.
In this case, so I think Michael's a very strong case, and I agree. You have to understand the restrainer to understand end time prophecy.
Yes. Because I know so many people just start getting into, the locusts coming out of the pit and just, putting their cart before their horse. And it's like, no, the locusts coming out of the pit, there's a lot more that's got to happen before we get to that point.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people tend to think that you can just jump forward. Or, people have, I get a lot of questions these days about the sign of September 23rd.
Yes.
That it's it's an astrology sign and it's an astronomical alignment. And there's no way that can be a sign of Revelation 12, because that's 3.5 years into the last 7 years, right? And we haven't had the stuff that was supposed to happen in the first 3.5 years, let alone the things that have to happen before that. So there's no way. What it will do is it's part of revving up this whole end time psychology, though.
Well, my ideology as far as these rapture predictions that keep occurring, it's there to just continually wear down weak Christians. They get their hopes up and then they're dashed.
Yep.
They get their hopes up and then they're dashed. And eventually they're like, you know what? I'm done with this.
Yes. And what type of tragic scenario will be once we have the universal religion, we have world government, we understand who negotiated this covenant of the world, who will be, we'll understand him as Antichrist on his rise to be crowned 3.5 years later. And Christians will be standing up and shouting at him and parading against them and belittling them and expecting to be raptured.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't come then, if the pre-trib rapture isn't correct and it's mid-trib or a little bit later, I mean, it's going to be a shaming of the saints en masse and will shake so many of the faithful maybe out of their faith.
Yeah, and that's why, I try to handle it with kid gloves when I do, speak to people that believe in pre-trib. I just try to tell them, well, that's fine, but just be prepared in case it doesn't. Get yourself spiritually ready if it doesn't occur, because, don't give up. If you get to that point and you're like, uh-oh, the Antichrist is here and why am I still here? Be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd all love to have it happen.
Oh, absolutely. I would love it.
But if it doesn't, that's the real issue.
Yep.
And I think, and again, without getting into a timing of it, because we all agree it happens, and
Yes.
something like the rapture shouldn't be used in a way to divide Christians. And so we just, as you say, we need to be prepared for all outcomes. And I know people say, I can define it definitively this way. Okay, that's fine. But there's also a really good argument for other timing.
Mm-hmm.
So be careful. That would be my advice. Be careful.
Yes.
And make sure, your faith should be on, Jesus and God, not on the timing of the rapture.
Exactly. Because we know that, his promise is a guaranteed promise, and no matter what happens, he will never, ever forsake us.
Yes. And none of us know when that day is going to come.
No.
But we know the signs, so, and we have the prophecies, so.
Yep.
We can be in the zone, but we just need to be careful.
Well, we're going out after 2 hours, so the time went by really fast.
It did.
It was a great show.
I thought it was a good show. And did we answer all of the questions coming out of the chat room?
Yep, we did. We got all that were asked.
Excellent.
So we will have to do this again here sometime.
We will. I want to thank you for inviting me back. It's very much appreciated, and hope to be back again.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Good night.
All righty. Good night. And to everybody out there, thanks for tuning in to tonight's show, and we will talk at you all later. Good night, and God bless.